and I'll be talking to you today about plant pollinator networks and how they can be used to recover biodiversity in cities. So firstly, what are these? So I'm defining them as the interactions between individual species of plants and their pollinators combined into a larger network of interactions. So for an example, this bumblebee here might pollinate this bird's foot truffle, and that would be one interaction. And then also this tomato plant, and that would be another. And then layering these creates this network. So this is quite important for example, let's say I was a farmer and I was growing tomatoes and they were pollinated by bees. I would want to make sure those populations were doing well. So I might plant bird's foot truffle as well, so there'd be another food source. So more complicated ones like this can be used to identify key species. So this paper here found that flies pollinated carrots, so were important in obtaining vitamin A, and that if they also relied a lot on wild plants as well. So if you were farming carrots in the area and needed those seeds, you'd want to make sure that flies were getting enough nutrition, like enough food, so maybe make sure that there were wild plants around as well. So why is this research really important? So plant pollinator networks are integral to a functioning ecosystem, but there's been a 58.5% decline in flying insects according to BiodiVerity between 2004 and 2021. And because they're needed for these ecosystem, like wider ecosystem functions, it also means that they're integral for food security. So why is this happening? So climate change, like light pollution and the introduction of disease are all factors. However, in the UK, the loss of floral resources due to changes in land management is one factor that's really integral, causing their decline. So between 1930 to 2007, 90% of meadowland and pasture has been lost in the UK, and this has been replaced by agriculturally improved grassland, arable land, and urbanisation. So arable land is especially bad because of the use of pesticides, herbicides, and the use of monoculture crops. But there is some good news. So green spaces in cities can significantly help this. So wildflower meadows can restore populations by providing habitat, creating spaces away from pesticides and herbicides, and providing floral resources that they really need. Interestingly, with regards to nectar resources in cities, the quality is much more important than the quantity. So small green spaces can still have a really positive impact. And if these are connected across a city, you can create these corridors that potentially boost biodiversity, essentially on a national scale if it was scaled up that wide. So what's my experiences? So I've worked as a research assistant, a volunteer, and have some experience with outreach and a little bit with R&D in terms of producing wildflower meadows. And so I have a couple of things that I'd like to share with everyone else. So firstly, when I was in Bristol, I was helping out with honeybee research, and this was looking into communication. And if you can see, this central bee has little waggle of their arms, which is what we're looking into. Okay. So I was helping them by setting up observation hives and also training honeybees to sugar solution. And this was also kind of helping out with other PhD students, learning a bit more about their work into how pesticides and changes in land use affect honeybee communication. This was also my first time that I was educating the public on current science. So this involved talking about the research I was doing, how we practically did that, and then also research by the rest of the team on stingless bees, as well as the importance of often overlooked species. So for kids, we did this through games, so we get them to kind of guess what pollinated what crop. So we have a cocoa plant here, and this is pollinated by midges, and a lot of them are in the same family as biting midges. This also then meant we could have discussions with adults as well, so it got everyone involved. We also wanted to talk about things that kind of everyone could do in their gardens to help pollinators. So we talked about a lot about kind of insect hotels like these and why they're important for the protection of solitary insects. So for example, this mason bee here. And we had examples of these nests that we could show people, which was pretty cool. So one thing that's really important, so alongside the creation of green spaces, we also need to make sure that we have the tools to make them work. So I was lucky enough to work with the R&D department of wildflower turf in Hampshire. And here we were doing quality checks of the product they were producing. So seed ID, making sure that the composition was right, and also doing germination studies to make sure that those seeds were actually going to grow. We also did some soil sampling, so we wanted to see how this wildflower turf affected the soil health beneath. So that's pretty cool. But what was especially interesting was learning how these products are implemented. So this wildflower seed and turf mix can be really expensive, and so you want to make sure that you implement it properly, else the conservation project is both costly and pretty ineffective. So they did this by getting landscapers and gardeners in and having these workshops, and they highlighted things like the importance of watering at the right time and other species interactions. So yellow rattle is really important with this. So yellow rattle is hemiparasitic, meaning that it can control grass species, stopping them from outcompeting other wildflowers. And so if you don't have enough of that, then you're going to mostly just get grass, you won't get that many wildflowers. However, if you have too much, you have the opposite problem, because it will start parasitizing wildflowers instead. It's also quite important to have grass around, because it provides a habitat for a lot of other insects. So as you can see, getting that ratio right is really important. So this led me to get my first research assistant job working on plant pollinators in Bristol. And here I mostly collected data on pollinator visitation, floral abundance, and how densities of hogweed can affect insect visitation. Which then led me to getting this same research assistant job with Newcastle Nature Networks. So this is a project following on from the Beeline's Northeast project, which ended in 2023, and their aim is to restore and create green spaces across Newcastle. So what was I doing on the project? I was helping the team of researchers collecting information on floral abundance and richness and insect visitation across a selection of parks in Newcastle. So we were also doing a bit of ID. So for example, bumblebees and then some easy to ID hoverflies like this Batman hoverfly, and then just kind of uploading that data. This project also wanted to record mowing regimes. So this is really important because overmowing can really negatively impact pollinators by reducing the amount of floral resources that are available to them. However, if you mow a few times during the year, say once in spring, once in summer, and once in autumn, it can encourage a more diverse range of flowering species to come up, and it replicates the behaviour of large herbivores that would originally have maintained these wildflower meadows. So having this data is really important because it helps the project figure out ways to help pollinators in the future. So it was also quite nice because I got to improve my own knowledge by going on ID days with NHSN, which was pretty cool. This is a skill that I wanted to develop anyway, and so yeah, it was just really helpful, and I learned a lot. And it kind of taught me a lot about habitats specific to the Northeast, and combined that with a bit of history, which was really interesting. It was also pretty cool because I've never been part of a project that combines so many different organisations working together. So there were universities, charities, and then other organisations all sharing expertise on how best to implement these conservation projects. And this led me to something that I really wanted to talk about a little bit, which is why outreach is so important. So, there are lots of barriers to conservation projects, all the way from individual to systemic, and it can make conservation projects in cities really hard to make work. Research by Greg et al. Showed that low self-advocacy and lack of interest can really limit what an individual will do. But as I said earlier, small green spaces can make a really big impact in cities. So by educating people not only on the importance of plant pollinator networks, but how their actions can actually benefit, can not only empower them, but communities on a wider scale. So I've done some outreach before, as I mentioned earlier, but again, never as part of a big project like this. And in Newcastle, charities like the Scoular Garden and the Ousburn Farm are doing this by working with children and adults, and showing them how to engage and learn about local wildlife. So a good example of this was for the Scoular Garden. They've been using traditional gardening methods to create both a spring and summer meadow. And so it not only creates these wild spaces for people to access, but teaches them a lot about how they can make those spaces for themselves. Another group that's also doing stuff similar to this is Wild Intrigue with their large herbivore days. So this involves like re-landscaping in some places. So for example, if you've walked by City Stadium, there's been like new wildflower meadows made and the creation of these big turf piles. And this is really cool because not only does it get people involved in re-landscaping and creating wild spaces in their own homes, well, cities, but it also highlights the importance of wider interactions. So we don't have these large herbivores anymore, so creating novel ways to keep our meadows healthy is really cool. So communicating the importance of this to the general public is quite hard, especially when everyone's so disconnected from nature. However, it's also not that often that small changes like reducing how much you might mow your lawn, understanding the importance of weeds, and also that of other species of, let's say, wasps and hoverflies, can make such a big difference. This company here created an animation to try and do that better, which I'm hoping will work and I can share that with you.
We all know that biodiversity is in decline. Insects in particular, pollinators of our food, are under great threat. Since the 1930s, 97% of our flower-rich grasslands have been lost in the UK, turned to deserts. But what if those deserts were just outside our back door, ready to be restored? We hold so much opportunity in the habitats that surround our homes, yet we often favour the tidy lawn. But in this critical time for nature, surely we could offer some oases. And not just any old flowers. Native wildflowers. The pollinator's favourite meal. So often demonised as weeds, these precious food sources flourish when we just leave our gardens alone from pesticides and mowing. There are other ways to help too. You can dig out a patch of lawn or use your garden borders to sow wildflower seeds. And even without a garden, you can get any space blooming. Doing so will create webs of habitat that allow pollinators to navigate and thrive in our increasingly urban world. From bus stops to road verges to upcycled containers and communal spaces. There is so much empty space that we can fill with the life-giving force of wildflowers, saving not only biodiversity, but ourselves too. So why not rewire your world?
So I hope that you guys have taken some stuff away from this. Principally, that plant-pollinator networks are really important for conservation, especially in cities, and that everyone is kind of needed to play a role in that. So from universities keeping research up to date, to companies producing reliable products and tools on how to implement them, and to charities creating green spaces that can be enjoyed by everyone. And also, I hope that you know a little bit more about what's actually going on in Newcastle. So for me, I'll be leaving the North East, which is very sad. I'll be working for the Field Studies Council down in Surrey, but hopefully I'll still be able to keep communicating this to other people. Any questions?